This is Combat Commander video number 6, and I'm going to start this one with a little bit more on blind hexes. We talked about how buildings create a single blind hex behind them when you're looking at them from a higher elevation, and woods hexes do the same. So in this situation here, just click onto the line of sight, the line squad to the Volksgrenadier, there would be no line of sight here because even though the line squad is on a crestline hex and they can see downhill, there's a woods hex in L8 and therefore there's a blind hex directly behind it, so the Volksgrenadier are in that blind hex, so there'd be no line of sight there. If the Volksgrenadier were in this hex, then that would be fine, they would have line of sight. There's only ever a single blind hex behind it. But if the Volksgrenadier were here, they would no longer be in line of sight because now they would be in the blind hex of this building here. Another example, we've got a line squad here this time and an E4. They are in a crestline hex again, so they can see downhill and they can currently see the Volksgrenadier squad without any problem. However, if the Volksgrenadier squad were here, then they would no longer be able to see them because of the blind hex caused by this building. If the Volksgrenadier squad was here, then they would have line of sight because they're in a building and they're on a level 1, but the line squad can still see downhill and they're below, so they would be in line of sight. If the Volksgrenadier squad was in E9 here, then they wouldn't be in line of sight because they would be in the blind hex of this building here in E8. If there was no building here, then they would have line of sight because hill hexes themselves don't create blind hexes. It's only buildings and woods that do it. And again, if the Volksgrenadier squad were there, then because buildings only ever create a single blind hex behind them, it doesn't matter how elevated they are, they only ever create a single blind hex behind them, the line squad would now have line of sight to the Volksgrenadier squad. This is the last example I'll do on blind hexes. This is a slightly different situation. The line squad again is on the crest hex and it can see downhill to the Volksgrenadier squad who are in this building here. Now if we move the Volksgrenadier squad to here, you might think, well, I'm looking downhill and there's a building and are they in the blind hex? Well, they're not. There would be line of sight between these two because the blind hex is only casted if the hex behind the building is on the same level or lower than the building. So in this case the building's on level 0 but the squad are actually on level 1, they're higher, so the building wouldn't cause a blind hex in D6 because it's a higher level. It has to be, for a blind hex, it has to be on an elevation level the same as or lower than the building that's casting the blind hex. Okay, I think that's enough on hills for now. As I said, the hills rules are probably the most complicated in Combat Commander, so it's certainly worth reading that section of the rulebook more than once. Now what we're going to look at now is firing ordnance weapons. If you remember, I said ordnance weapons were weapons that had this white strip along the bottom. Now they fire in a slightly different way. You have to fire them individually, they can't be part of a fire group, and they have an extra step in the kind of fire attack procedure, and that is making a targeting roll. So they have to roll to hit. Everything else, you just make the attack roll and the defense roll, and it's automatically assumed that you've kind of hit. But for the ordnance weapons, you've got to make a hit first. So the way that we make a targeting roll is that we count the number of hexes between the fire and the target, and obviously if that exceeds the range on your weapon, then you can't make the shot anyway. But if you're in range, then the number of hexes between you, that's kind of like your that's the total that you have to beat on your targeting roll. So in this case the range will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you make a roll. So you draw a card from the deck and from the top of your deck, and instead of adding the numbers together with the targeting, you multiply them together, and once you've multiplied them together, it has to exceed the range between you and the target. So in this case we'd have to roll, and then it would have to be 6 or more. A 5 or less would be a failure, and it would mean that you'd missed. So in this case we've rolled a 5 and a 2, and we've got an event, so we'd have to, event trigger, we'd have to resolve the event before we carried on with the fire attack. But in this case we'd have a 10, so we would have hit. The important points to note is that the cover that the target's in doesn't make any difference to the targeting roll, but hindrances do. And hindrances make a difference to the targeting roll. Once you've completed the targeting roll, you then carry on with the rest with the attack procedure as normal, and the hindrances won't make any difference to the fire attack roll. They'll only modify the targeting roll. So if we had this situation, we'd be at range 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 still, but we would have a hindrance of 2 for the orchards. So instead of having to get 6 or more to exceed the 5, we'd have to get 8 or more to exceed the 7, the 5 for the range, and then the +2 for the hindrances. And then once we'd done that, we would then have to resolve a fire attack with our, if we hit with our firepower of 10 against their defense, their morale value of 7 plus the cover of 2, so it'd be against the defense roll with 9 as the starting value. They wouldn't get anything added to their defense roll for the hindrance. The hindrance only affects the targeting roll. Okay. So again, I'll make a roll for this one. And we've got a 4 and a 6. This is our targeting roll, so we've got 24, which has exceeded the 7 that was from the 2 from the hindrances and the 5 from the range. So the pack howitzer is hit, and now we resolve the fire attack roll. So we've got 10 firepower, and we'll make a roll, and we've got 8. So that our fire attack total would be 18, and the defense total would be 7 for the morale, 2 for the cover. They wouldn't get the 2 for the hindrance, so it'd be 9, and then their roll is 6 or 15, so they would be broken because our 18 beats their 15, so they would be broken. So that's the basic ordnance procedure, not too tricky. Just have to remember to do your targeting roll, and you have to remember to multiply the two numbers together rather than adding them when you're doing your targeting roll. And it goes against the range plus any hindrances. That's pretty much it. The other thing that ordnance can do is, some of them anyway, can fire smoke rounds. And this procedure is exactly the same. We still make a targeting roll. We don't have to pick a hex with enemy units in. We can pick any hex we want, and you make a targeting roll just the same as you did when you were firing normally. And if you hit, if you're successful, then you would put a random smoke marker into that hex, so that can be quite useful for providing cover for your troops. But that's only on ordnance weapons, so these ones with the white stripe that have got the word smoke down one side, they have the smoke capability. The only other thing I'm going to say about ordnance is to remember that the leadership, the command bonus, doesn't apply to ordnance weapons. It applies to normal weapons like machine guns, but if you notice here, the pack howitzer stats have stayed the same. Let's move into the pack howitzer stats to stay the same, whereas the line troops have all gone up by 1 because they do get the command bonus, but the ordnance weapons, they don't get the command bonus. In the next video I'm going to talk about the fire action, the opportunity fire, but it's fairly similar in most respects to the fire order. It's just the timing of when you do it. So that'll be in the next video.